So I only have 2 slides. This is the first one. And we actually dug up the original ICSI research plan. And I'll tell you a little bit about that. And then we'll get into a bit more recent stuff. So first of all, on behalf of the hundreds of students, scientists, and visitors who've been able to take advantage of ICSI, I'd like to thank all of the people and institutions that made that possible. And as we've seen, German industry, academics, and government has been a founding and continuing sponsor, along with the University of California at Berkeley. So that it's been a partnership from the beginning. And I'd also mention that other countries have provided institutional support over the years, including Brazil, Finland, Italy, Spain, and Switzerland. Of course, industry, individual contributions, but most directly, the technical and administrative support staff at ICSI. And this is not always brought up. That's one of the unique features of the institution is the dedication and very high level of support. Part of my story, which Ron told, is that there was a problem of how does all this fit together. And so I was, as Ron was saying, a responsibility with no authority, and had to help bring together German industry and research, the U.S. federal government, along with concerns about stealing secrets, and the University of California. Does anybody want to guess which one of those was hardest to deal with? Right. So the people at Cal, when this was being set up, and Ron mentioned some of this, made a deliberate decision not to try to put it into the university. University of California is a branch of the state government. So you can imagine all of the restrictions and anything you want to do. So one of the continuing really valuable things about ICSI is the fact that it's an independent nonprofit with a board made up of people from the sponsors, but it enables us to move more efficiently, and that's one important piece. Another important piece, which isn't always mentioned, is that the people in German government and industry, not academics, also wanted to bring about culture change. That there's a European traditional top-down, when you get to be a professor, then you can control some research. It doesn't work for computer science, where most of the innovation is young people. And so that was an explicit goal. And as Wolfgang has pointed out, it's been a pretty successful goal. So that's more of what's going on. So let me go on to talk more about the original program that's in this research plan, and you've probably already read some of it, but it tried to lay out, first of all, it's thick, so there was a lot of very technical stuff in it, but it also tried to lay out some of the fundamental motivating things. Oh, before I do that, I should mention, why did I get into all this? Okay, so partly I was bored. Okay, things were going okay. But mainly, I had this kind of crazy vision about the possibilities of neural computation, neural nets, whatever. And it was way beyond what I could do or what I could, build in the departments. The notion of possibly getting an institution set up where you could get hardware people and theory people and all that sort of focused on this issue of parallel and massively parallel computation was the basic motivation. And I'm happy to say that we didn't do nearly as well as I thought we would, but we did pretty well. So the original group was 4 group leaders. Morgan was one, I was one, and then there were these 2 other guys who you already heard about, Dick Karp and Domenico Ferrari. So there were 2 of the leading members of the department were also interested in expanding their capabilities and set up groups there. So in note, what? I'm sorry. The key ideas, and again they've already been brought up, is that it was investigator-driven research, and I told people that if they wanted, development research, we could help them find people in the states that would do that for them, but it wasn't us. And also that the sponsors' control was, if they pointed out to us someplace else in the world where the same thing was being done better, we would quit. And there was one such instance, I forget which one. But anyway, that was the bargain. So the groups, and the main point of what I'm saying is you'll see a lot of continuity between not only the original principles, but even some of the main original topics. So there was the theory group that Dick Karp started. He brought in a number of excellent people, including Lenore and Manuel Blum, and one of his excellent students, Mike Luby, who is then became the head of the department when Dick went for a brief stay in Seattle. And we'll talk later. So you'll hear a really interesting story about Mike's adventure from pure theory to the business world and all that stuff. And Dick stayed, came back to ICSI and stayed until he took over the position as director of the Simons Institute for Theoretical Computer Science. And he just retired from that, so maybe he'll come back. I don't know. The networking group, as we mentioned, was founded by Domenico Ferrari, and he had this far-out idea that media would probably be important on the internet. And that was the basis of the original starting. Domenico also retired and had to go back to Italy, and there was actually a kind of a slow period in the networking world here. And till Scott Schenker came, and he is now, of course, the ICSI chief scientist, and we'll hear from him some more later. But he brought with him an all-star cast, including Sally Floyd, who's here, who was a student of Dick Karp's, and Vern Paxson, who we'll hear from later, who was a student of Domenico Ferrari's. So there is this continuing cycle story. People seem to like Berkeley and like ICSI pretty well. So then there were two other groups, and they were related, both concerned with neural network and applications of it. And as I've already been mentioned, Morgan took over the leadership and brought in people for the hardware end. And one of the quote students who came in had a lot of technical leadership of the hardware projects. And you'll hear from him later, Kristi Asarnovich. And Morgan will talk himself about the speech work, which he continued to direct. And finally, the other group was the one that I led for some time. And then at some point, Srini Narayanan, who should still be here, maybe not. Anyway, there he is, yeah. So Srini took over. And so he ran that until, for personal reasons, he had to relocate to Zurich. But there's still good collaboration, a lot of good collaboration between Google and ICSI in the area of natural language. And I'll go to the next slide as long as you have read the last paragraph. Okay. So that's the report. Okay, so we'll go to the next slide, which probably is that. Yeah. So this is a recent interview with the Guardian, fairly reputable newspaper. Interviewed this guy called Ben Gomes, who is head of search at Google. So what he says about Google is probably worth listening to. And Ben, interestingly, was also an ICSI alum. So he was a graduate student in my group. And he didn't do speech or language. He did basic work on parallel computing. Okay. But he probably got infected by hanging out with all the speech and language people, and he's a believer. So that's another indication of the kind of impact that we expect. And later, we'll get a full 15-minute talk from Nancy Chang, who was another member of the group, who's now in the bloody edge of trying to do this at Google. Finally, I will be followed by Nelson Morgan, who, among other things, is the continuing leader of speech-related efforts, but mainly, I think, is responsible for turning an idea into an institution. So Morgan's time as director is what actually brought some sort of stability